Hello everyone, in this video I'll be showing you a pure 12 Great Old One Warlock build guide in Baldur's Gate 3. Just in time for Halloween, this Eldritch inspired subclass is a ton of fun, mostly due to the mortal reminder that we get at level 1, which when you land a critical hit against a creature, that creature and any nearby enemies in a 3-meter radius must do a wisdom saving throw or become frightened until the end of their next turn. When a target's frightened, they cannot move and they'll have disadvantage on their attack rolls and ability checks, which is just great. It also gives us access to Dissonant Whispers and Tasha's Hideous Laughter. I'll be honest, the subclass exclusive spells are not that great compared to like the Fiend or the Hexblade having great spell selection. But with this, we're going to be taking at level 1. I like to take Hex, as you're going to want to do Eldritch Blast to potentially get critical hits, and this will give us extra damage on top of those. Hellish Rebuke can be a good choice too, or the Armor of Agathith, or Arms of Hadar. I like to have Dissonant Whispers here, though. And then for our ability scores, we're Charisma based. We're going to build around that. And I like to go with a high Dexterity here. So a stat spread of 16 Dex, 16 Charisma, 14 Constitution, 10 Intelligence, and Wisdom can work well. You can swap the Dexterity and Constitution if you prefer. I just like it for the higher initiative. In level 2, we get our Eldritch Invocations. This is where our power really comes from. I like to take at early levels Repelling Blast and Devil's Sight. If you don't like Devil's Sight and Darkness, you can use Agonizing Blast. But I find that early game, you can have someone on your team with Dark Arrow, shoot an enemy with a Darkness Arrow, then you can run up to them. When you're in Darkness, you're likely going to get advantage on your attack rolls, which increases your critical hit chance. That's my preferred way of doing things. So yeah, I like Devil's Sight and Repelling Blast. And then for the spell we'll take, Hellish Rebuke can be okay early game damage. Tasha's Hideous Laughter will knock targets prone, which can also be kind of nice, but your choice at that point. Level 3. Pact of the Blade. We need to take this because it gives us melee options in combat. Pact of the Chain is very lackluster, and Pact of the Tome giving us haste is not really that great compared to Pact of the Blade, which sometimes we do want a melee attack. Actually, often we will because of Shadow Blade. Doing 2d8 of psychic damage at level 2. Once we get level 5 spell slots unlocked, we then do 4d8, which is insane damage considering this is doubled if you have the Resonance Stone, which you get at the end of Act 2. Crazy, crazy stuff. I typically prefer to take the Hold Person spell here. I like the Fiend over the Great Old One because the Fiend also would get Scorching Ray at this level, but we'll take Hold Person and focus more so on melee damage. At level 5, we get our extra attack. But until then, we're going to take, I guess I should have mentioned, we want to have Eldritch Blast and Booming Blade for our cantrips at level 1. Eldritch Blast is just a given for the Warlock, and Booming Blade is a very powerful weapon option as well. If you're the face of the party, friends can be good too. There is merit in taking Bone Chill to be able to stop targets from receiving healing. I personally like Mage Hand to have it throw healing potions or water bottles to your teammates, but we want Booming Blade and Eldritch Blast, the two best cantrips. At this point, I really like to take Shadow Blade. If you don't like Shadow Blade, the spell Cloud of Daggers is guaranteed damage. If the enemy walks through it, it doesn't have a check, it just takes damage, so that's great too. Mirror Image and Misty Step can be okay at this level, although at later levels they're not that great because you're spending a high level spell slot only to get a +9 to armor class. Now for our first feat here, I would actually recommend taking our Charisma up to 18. And it is nice to take the alert feat, but there is items we can get to kind of help out with initiative a bit. Level 5 gives us our extra attack, and this is also going to have a weapon attack roll of +4 from our charisma modifier, so it's pretty nice. So melee attack's powerful. Now we get access to one of our best spells with Hunger of Hadar. This does start to fall off a little bit later because it doesn't upcast, but it's going to create a darkness pocket that we don't actually get benefits from. Just want to put a little heads up on that. We don't actually benefit from using the Hunger of Hadar. It's only to trap enemies in. If we're in it, we also take that damage and get blinded, despite having Devil's Sight. Now for our level 5 Invocation, we're going to go with Agonizing Blast to add our Charisma modifier, so +4 onto our Eldritch Blast beams. We also then get at level 6 the Entropic Ward. So as a reaction, you can impose disadvantage on an attack roll against you. If the attack misses, you will then have advantage on your next attack roll against the attacker for 1 turn. We get advantage on attack rolls often, but this is nice. This is kind of like Warding Flare from the Light Cleric, basically turning an attack into disadvantage. If they're going to hit you, you can react and stop that. This is just really a better version than that, because we get the advantage on our next attack roll. Now, I personally really like to take Counterspell, but Darkness is something we also want to have there too. I took Hold Person earlier, but Darkness with Shadow Blade is really good. I mentioned Darkness Arrows. That's typically a little bit better, so we don't have to concentrate on it. But yeah, Darkness is really good too, so you can also take that spell. Now, we also get level 4 spells at this point. Fear can be an okay choice. We get the unique spells Dominate Beast and Average Black Tentacles. These aren't really that great. It creates difficult terrain, which is okay. It's just gross. Blight is an okay spell. I personally like to go with, I mean, you can take Average Black Tentacles, but I prefer to have Darkness here because this is our own safety pocket. So we can use this and keep ourselves from getting hit. Now, once we get to our invocation here, I would actually recommend you go back. If you're the face of the party, Beguiling Influence gives you proficiency in deception and persuasion checks. And you could also alternatively go with Dreadful Word to give yourself a confusion, which is good. Actually, a very useful spell. It does require concentration, however. Just entirely your choice there. Beguiling Influence would be the face of the party, however. Level 8, we get access to another choice in spell here. I guess we can take Average Black Tentacles. And then for our feat, I would recommend an ability score improvement on Charisma or the Alert feat. And if you had your Charisma at 17, you can use the Hags here to take it to 18, which would then have our Charisma at 20 at this point. Level 9, we get access to Hold Monster, which is good. When the Fiend and the Hexblade get access to Cone of Cold at this level, you start to feel the weakened spell list here, but we do get an extra ability at next level. I also like to take the Minions of Chaos. Minions of Chaos are great because they can set up vulnerability to cold damage, but if we had Cone of Cold, that'd be useful because it doubles Cone of Cold's damage. But our level 10 ability is this Psychic Reflection, which is very useful in the late game because you don't take, whenever you take Psychic damage, you can make the target take the same amount of damage. Mind Flayers will do that. And Psychic Resistance, you gain resistance to Psychic damage. So it is a little bit tricky because while we have resistance, we also have an item that can actually reduce that. And what's funny is you take half damage, so the enemy would only take half damage too. Interesting. I like to have Mage Hand or friends there. And then for our next level 5 spell, we really got everything that we want from this build. You could take the Crown of Madness or Fear for some crowd control. Even like Shatter can be an okay one because it will upcast to a higher version. It does okay damage. Level 11, we get our Mystic Arcanum. Now, Circle of Death is a good choice. You could also use Eye Bite and hold your concentration on Eye Bite. This is a nice choice. Create Undead is another really fun one because this gives you an extra summon. This is probably the true best, but I prefer Circle of Death for the huge area of effect damage, and this can be pretty useful in certain situations. And you also could Friendly Fire, so just a heads up on that. Now, I guess there's not really any spell here. It's your choice. I'm taking Shatter. Sometimes it's nice to have that for an area of effect. Level 12, this gives us our final spell here. I guess Dominate Person could be an okay choice. Now for our Eldritch Invocation, Life Drinker. This adds our Charisma modifier to our necrotic damage on melee attacks, which is great. Previously used to say Pack Weapon, now it just says your weapon deals, so they changed it in patch 8. We're going to want to add an additional point to that, so we'll take our Charisma up to 20 there. If you use the Hag's Hair and had your Charisma at 17, you can ignore that, and instead you could add in something like the Warcaster, give yourself advantage on Constitution saving throws. If you don't want to use the Constitution Amulet, you could also add in Spell Sniper. We already got Eldritch Blast, but you could take a different cantrip here. The critical hit chance is nice because that's going to potentially frighten targets. And then we can also go with, I guess, the Actor Feat gives you proficiency bonus added for deception and performance checks. And even something like the Lucky is a good feat as well. And you can even go with like the Medium Armor to be able to get medium. If you want to get Medium Armor, you could go Moderately Armored, I guess. And then you could have set your Dexterity to 17. Another good option. And this is the Share Wraith Armor mod. I'll show you some actual base game armor now. Now, there's many pieces of gear that actually work well on this build. That's the nice thing about it. The Helmet of Arcane Acuity, when you do melee attacks, you're going to get a +2 to your spell save DC. And this pairs very nicely if you take the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, because then we can do our melee attacks, get our spell save up so that we don't miss our spells. And then as a bonus action, we can do Hold Person. That's a pretty nice option. However, you don't have to use this here. The Helmet of Arcane Acuity is nice, but if you have it on somebody else, we could also add in the Birthright Hat, because with the Birthright Hat there, this is going to add a +2 to our Charisma, which is going to increase our melee damage and our spell casting, although I do prefer the Helmet of Arcane Acuity. I also like to add on the Cloak of Protection or Deathstalker Mantle if you're Dirge. The early game, I guess if you're Dirge, you can't get this item here, so we're using the Cloak of Protection. And the Potent Robe adds additional Charisma modifier damage to your cantrip, so Eldritch Blast is really good. It'll also give you temporary health equal to your Charisma modifier and a +1 armor class. So early game, this is a great option. Now we are in a bit of a weird situation because late armors, there's not a lot of great ones. So sometimes it's actually best to wear clothing options. Or if you get late game, the Hellisk Armor is going to be the best choice for this because we really just have like the, I guess the Drow armor. And even still, that's not really that great. In fact, you're probably better off using the Vest of Soul Rejuvenation, which gives you the greater Kashigo counter. So a reaction attack, and then armor class is higher with this. I honestly do feel like I'd never use the Helldusk armor on builds, but this fits it very well since we don't have any extra way to get our armor class up. This is the only way if we want to be tanky. If you don't want to be tanky, that's fine. You could literally wear any type of clothing. The Potent Robe would be a great choice. The Robe of the Weave being another good choice too. And you could even go with the Ballast armor, which will give you actually a respectable armor class of 21 and a boost to our initiative. And then it makes everyone in a 3-meter radius vulnerable to piercing damage. So if we use something like Rhapsody, that can be really good. I'm not going to. I'm actually going to use Shadow Blade for this build. You don't have to use Shadow Blade though. You can actually use the Ballast Armor and a Dagger if you prefer it, or the Infernal Rapier for piercing damage. I'm going to go with the Helldusk Armor just for this build since I never use it. And I think it actually fits this build well, but early game, you're going to want to use the Potent Robe or your best available Light Armor. This is because I wanted to use Shadow Blade with the Resonance Stone to double the damage to show you how powerful this can truly get, and because we also have the Brain Drain Gloves. When you deal psychic damage, you apply Mental Fatigue, which gives a -2 to the Intelligence, Charisma, and Wisdom saving throws the enemy takes. So this is crazy because not only are we boosting our spell save DC when we map weapon attack by 2, we're also draining their saves by 2. So we get a net +4 to a save, and then we can do a bonus action one. That is crazy. I also have the Boots of Stormy Clamor because when we apply a condition, Mental Fatigue, we'll then apply 2 stacks of Reverberation. At 5 stacks, they can do it. They take 1d4 of thunder damage, and they do a check to knock them prone. You can actually have them knock themselves prone by just walking towards you and a teammate because you can threaten them, and that's a condition, which will knock them prone, ending their turn. It's actually kind of crazy. I also got this Shadow Cloaked Ring here. Since we're going to be in the shadows, we get additional 1d4 of damage. That's really good. There's actually a lot of different ways we can go about building this. We could use the Ring of Arcane Synergy here. When we do damage with the cantrip, we get our Charisma modifier, which is a +5 added to our weapon damage. So 1d4 or +5. The +5 is a little bit better. There's also the critical hit ring there. There's also the Ring of Mental Inhibition, which will also apply Mental Fatigue, but I prefer this on a sorcerer for casting. There's also the Strange Conduit Ring, which gives us a 1d4 of psychic damage, which is further enhanced again by the Resonance Stone, so that can be a potential of 8 damage. Pretty nice. And again, we got the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel, because that's going to give us the bonus action commands and hold persons. And then on top of that, we got the Hellrider Longbow for the +3 to our initiative, the Viconia's Walking Fortress, and I have Rhapsody there if you're not going to use the any type of staff. If you're using a staff, you can go ahead here with Marka Heshker, and when you use Marka Heshker, you get the Arcane Battery, or the Staff of Spell Power can do this too. And then you can go ahead here and take the free cast of the Arcane Battery, and then whenever you go here, you can then get yourself a free Shadow Blade, which is just great. So this will keep our spell slots full, give us a Shadow Blade, unequip the staff, and now we have a 4d8 damage, which gets advantage on lightly or heavily obscured targets. Now, what's great about this is you're going to get an increased critical hit chance. Now, I already know there's going to be some comments. Why don't you use critical stacking gear? I've tested it out, and it's actually not as good as if you're going to use something like the Brain Drain Gloves and the Helmet of Arcane Acuity. Typically, you'd have critical hit items for these. You'd have the critical hit bow. I think it's better to get high initiative, drain the enemy's ability to save on spells, boost our ability to land our spells, do an attack, get the bonus action, hold person off. That's kind of the overview of how you'd use it in combat. And you can also use your Conjure Elemental there, and you can just do a quick short rest, get your spell slot back, or you can use the staff to get the free cast as well. And don't forget to bind your packed weapon. And we kind of lucked out with enemies being in this big circle here. This lets us do something like the Circle of Death and hit pretty much everyone you can see there. So that's not a bad option. The Circle of Death isn't going to be the most powerful spell, but you can see there we disintegrated 5 targets. Pretty useful if you have Call of Weak. Now, what I would actually like to do is set up our Safety Pocket of Darkness. Now, that didn't eat up a spell slot because it's a free level 6 spell. And I'm also playing as a Drow, so I have a free Darkness spell. This is going to be how we actually power up and reach our full potential here. I could have also just went with a Hex and blasted away if there was a target there that had really high damage. We don't have much else to do, so we can actually just do a Flourish here, which is, I guess, fine. We won't roll a crit on that. It knocks them off balance. We got that additional Life Drinker damage. Wasn't enough, but they're blinded, so we're fine. So not a bad first turn. A little thing with Darkness is the enemies will only throw through it, so if you're able to cut off line of sight, you can protect your entire team. Just be noted, your team won't be able to attack through it either. But the way the enemies end up working is they'll end up dashing through it, so they'll end up on the other side of the darkness or within the darkness where you can destroy them, and your teammates are going to be fine. And you can see here, they're only going to do throwing attacks, which they're oftentimes not geared up to do well. So that can be really nice. And then you can see there, we got our opportunity attack to do 54 damage. And sometimes they do attack into the darkness, although they're blinded, so they're going to have disadvantage in the attack roll. It's not often that they do that, but if you're on the edge, they will sometimes, like this target has 5 mental fatigue. Kind of silly. I also use the Earth Elemental there. I like the Soil Clog Slam because you can actually, or you can knock them prone there, and then also the Seismic Strike's pretty nice. Pretty effective. And then it's our turn again. So now we want to get our spell save DC up. We have only +3 here, so I would recommend using a Booming Blade on targets that have higher health. This target has a bit higher health, so I'm going to use that there. Bonk, that was enough to take them out and deal a little extra damage. And you see, we got advantage on our attack rolls, which is crazy. The Shadow Blade is very powerful. Because they're in a slight bit of shadow, it actually counts as giving the advantage. I guess I'll go after this. This target's high value, 99% hit chance. Boom, 58 damage to the Resonant Stone is crazy. And Shadow Blade actually refreshes every time that you get an action. So that was multiple actions there. I would love to do something with the spells that we got here, but unfortunately my concentration on darkness. I guess I could, since this is probably going to end next turn. I got my... so 99% hit chance, and this target has mental fatigue, 99% hit chance. That's the only 2 targets left. That's fine. We can just hit them. It's a waste of a spell slot, but I just want to illustrate how crazy the Band of Mystic Scoundrel is. They skip their turns, which means that we can just go up and Unholy Smite them. And this is pretty much just going to end the combat here, because all you have to do is just do it. You don't even have to do Booming Blade. It's a free critical hit on 104 damage. Absolutely absurd. And this will finish it off. Probably going to Mindbreaker character. Yeah, that's fine. 94 damage. Crazy. Now, I did a video where I ranked all 4 of the subclasses, and I did put this one in a B tier. It is still quite strong, but the Frightened ability is not as powerful as some of the other abilities you get from the Fiend or the Hexblade, which is added in patch 8. But all of the Warlock got a huge buff because Shadow Blade is so good. Booming Blade and Shadow Blade combined is crazy. And then the Hexblade also got a unique new smell with Staggering Smite, which will do additional psychic damage. So you can actually like one-shot everyone with that. But the Great Old One is still very strong. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hit the subscribe button below if you enjoyed. We'll catch you all in the next video.